Hello everyone and welcome to His Author's Voice, and I am the author Jack Sanger. Today's podcast is a bit of a diversion from the usual run of things. It's about death. Not, I hope, so sombre that you immediately turn off your computers, but a kind of meditation involving one or two events in my life and thoughts I've had about death and the afterlife. I've called it the big sleep. So perhaps you could listen to it and I'll make one or two remarks afterwards. The big sleep, or the delights of deceasing. I've had computer problems in the past despite supposedly being well protected. I remember everything ground to a halt a few years ago, and A Prisoner in Its Innards was the last update of the book I was writing called Azimuth. The fact that it had taken me 10 years and is 1,000 pages long added to the frisson of despair that attended my attempts to right the sinking ship. But I was in Ghana, and around the corner a fellow dived like an undersea engineer's to where the wreckage of my data was spewing into the etheric ocean, and he rectified everything. Data back and all working properly again for the princely sum of £7.50. I've written often enough about entropy, how everything we do, no matter how exacting we are as taskmasters over our own destinies, gradually breaks down and chaos ensues, and here was yet another example. Meanwhile, in parallel, I remember watching quite an old but brilliant series called The Human Body, fronted by that genial doctor with the perfect mix of humility and curiosity, Robert Winston. If you've not seen it, and or have not had kids, please take this as a strong recommendation. It follows a journey through the life of humans, from egg to dead. The science is fascinating and the lessons extraordinary. I'm at that age where much of the journey represents where I have come from to this moment. The last of all episodes deals with the decease of a German fellow in Southern Ireland. It is poignant, challenging, and uplifting. The camera does not show his last breath, but it's a pretty close-run thing. He didn't want the cancer drugs, preferring a slightly shorter life of greater quality than being hospitalized in an antiseptic clinical environment. He was an atheist, and somehow this added luster to his struggle. All of us have to face the final curtain, as the cliche goes, but most of us want it to come down while we're asleep. I'm going to stand out from the herd here. I'd prefer to be awake and see it come down. Winston says that we cannot divulge what happens in the end game, despite the thousands of near misses that people have had, reporting tunnels of light with their loved ones waiting with outstretched arms. It turns out that even this may be a trick of the mind. Aeronauts on high-speed simulators report the same illusion as they lose consciousness. If it is to be so private and personal that no one will ever know how we moved on from dead in our heads, then so be it. But it'd be worth being awake, don't you think? Our last lesson learned as the brain ceases to function. After that, our atoms break free from the little force fields that held them in body colonies and are carried away on the universal tide. They were there from the beginning of time and have travelled through suns and planets and cold empty spaces all their existence. We are stardust, we are golden, sings Joni Mitchell. It's nice that these atoms spent a brief flickering moment as part of a human life, don't you think? It'd be great to have someone take me at the penultimate second of my existence round the corner and have all my data and processing restored for £7.50. But since that day belongs to a genetic progeny of mine far in the future, who knows how far into the future, I will be content to keep my eyes open to the last. I saw something one day which was new to me. I like to keep myself as fit as possible. In Ghana, this required true dedication to the contours of the body. Even in the evening, it is close to 30 degrees and the humidity is extremely high. Thus, exercise is both a challenge but also a reward as the sweat pours off and so one can cut down the time one spends in this masochistic pursuit of a few extra years of life. Perhaps you've heard that at 70 you can have 3/4 of the strength you had as a young, vibrant, semen-rich 20-year-old male. I can't think of the equivalent hyperbole for women, but it must exist. At the same time, we know that the body replaces cells at a fantastic rate, some every 3 days. So the question arises, why do we age? The answer appears to be that when the body replaces cells, it copies the last known version as its prototype. Now imagine taking a photograph and then scanning it, and then scanning the last scan, on and on for 80 years. What would your final scan look like? The answer is a very decrepit version of the original, a pixelated morass. It's another example of entropy. In the academic world, plagiarism is a crime probably worse than homicide, and here we have the body managing it on a huge scale. It seems irrevocable, then, that we just break down. That is why there is such a buzz about stem cell surgery. Take some stem cells from me when I'm very young and store them until I'm very old, then begin growing and replacing bits and bobs of my body, not with the zillionth copy, but with relative originals. It will happen, but not, as I say, just yet. This entropic process continues all around us, from political parties running out of steam and ideas, to houses needing constant upgrading, to businesses who forget to develop their workforces, to crockery and glassware in the kitchen. The universe itself may be heading, it seems, for its own final entropic big sleep, where all the atoms that comprise it are spread through an infinity of icy blackness so far apart that they can no longer interact and make stars, planets, or us. So, what our medical mentors of the end game are currently doing is encouraging our cells to copy cells with greater accuracy so that they're a bit stronger than they would have been otherwise. The finishing line may or may not remain in the same place, but we will run as close as we can to it before being forced into that final crawl. Why is it that when you've been writing about a subject, well, death in this case, your life imitates art? Not that I've died since my last prose, nor anyone that close to me, but the subject of death has entered conversations, and I'm sure that I'm not the one that has guided it there. Maybe something happened telepathically, in the zeitgeist way it can. Jung called it synchronicity, a sort of juxtaposition of events, thoughts, or feelings that seem beyond normal understanding. I've just reread this paragraph, and it raises the interesting notion of receiving a communication across the ether by a podcast. You wouldn't know whether I was dead or alive, would you, Herr Schrödinger? Anyway, I was asked at a dinner party whether I believed in God, and I said no. I was more of a sort of rudimentary Buddhist. The conversation went on to whether there is an afterlife. I said that no one, as far as I know, had come back to tell us that there was. I remember once going to a spiritualist church where everyone believed their families were out there or up there, waiting for them with open arms, but it seemed to me to be on a par with end-of-the-pier magic shows. Anyway, one of the group, a seemingly staid vet, told a gripping tale about the death of his mother. When they were gathered together as a family to share out her jewellery and other possessions, an argument broke out between two of her daughters over a particular piece which was missing. Then a third daughter broke in. Speaking astonishingly in their mother's voice, she declared that this particular heirloom was hidden in a drawer and described where they might find it. This girl had never spoken in tongues before or since, and they were all rather scared, hearing their mother apparently speak through her. Whether this constitutes proof of life after death, I know not, but it did to them. I'm unsure whether Christianity embraces ghosts or otherworldly communication, since my religious education ended when I was 11 and thrown out of the choir of the local church for letting off a stink bomb. But I have a feeling it doesn't. Heaven has airlocked gates and no email connections, wireless or sepulchral voices to communicate with us. My own mother swore that when people in the family died, the fire irons would rattle in the hearth. But I never saw it happen. There are plenty of beguiling stories, but they never happened to me. I'm a doubting Thomas, I suppose, and I want to see the wraith myself, or hear the disembodied voice. I would willingly spend a night in a haunted house, happily waiting for the chains to clank, the doors to creak, and the hollow tread on the floorboards. Back to the dinner party. It emerged that all of them missed their parents, mothers in particular, so much so that they wanted there to be an afterlife so that they could rejoin them. Maybe I'm made of sterner stuff, or maybe I'm an unfeeling old sod. But I don't experience that longing, much as I really loved my mother. It seems to me that whatever this life has for us, it does not include extensions into other dimensions. Buddhists believe that there is a connection between this life and the next and the others that follow. But the analogy I heard one of them use was that of a snooker ball striking another, and then that one striking a further ball. The first ball creates a spiritual force that makes the others move, but they remain separate and unable to communicate otherwise. So, in short, the hereafter is all balls, unless you are a believer. So there we have a few preliminary light-hearted thoughts about the nature of death and dying. I hope you, whatever the term is, enjoyed listening to it and it provoked some thought of your own. Anyway, I'd probably write and podcast one or two more in this vein, as I think I've got a lot to say about it. If you want to download short stories, plays, novels, go to my site, www.jacksanger.com. And I hope you subscribe to this site and tell your friends about it. Until next time, I wish you bye-bye. Bye-bye.